Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading from the book Herodotus and the Road to History by Jeanne Bendick, and today we're going to read chapter 5, Back to Samos and Away Again to Babylon. When I finally got back to Samos, the family had moved there because of political problems in Halicarnassus. When I got back to Samos after my years of travel in the north, I found my family organizing a new assault on Halicarnassus, still trying to get rid of the tyrant, Ludamus. Stubbornness certainly runs in my family. This time we did it. Ludamus was overthrown, and the family moved back to Halicarnassus, which is now Greek. For some years, I was involved in the political affairs of the city, but again, I grew more and more restless, wondering what was going on in the world outside and eager to continue my inquiries and explorations. I began wandering the waterfront again, talking to the traders, thinking about where to go next. I most admired the Phoenicians, who I think are the best sailors in the world, with the best boats. I've heard a story about Phoenician sailors who more than 100 years ago sailed around the whole continent of Africa. And there's a picture in this book that shows it, the route that they took, which they called Libya. They started south in the Arabian Gulf, sailed, stopped, sailed again, then sailed north, so they said. After 3 years, sailed east through the Pillars of Hercules and back to Egypt. And the Pillars of Hercules is the Strait of Gibraltar, which is between Spain and Africa. So they started here and went around and then back again. Well, I decided to look it up because there was another story I had heard about the Phoenicians. They were such good sailors, and I am going to be holding my computer up quite a bit to show you some pictures. And the picture on the left with a purple and white sail is a CNN program, Transatlantic Crossing to Phoenicians Best Columbus by 2,000 Years. There are some that believe that the Phoenicians actually discovered America and were here 2,000 years before Columbus. And I didn't get too much into it, but you might want to look it up. But it's based on some coins that were found that had Phoenician, they were Phoenician coins, basically. But anyway, the Phoenicians are a very interesting group. I also looked up where they were located, and they were located, Phoenicia was located in what today is Syria and Israel, along that coast. Moving on. I find it hard to believe that story, but Phoenicians do dominate the Mediterranean, and they sail to the edges of the known world. Of course, no one knows the extent of Europe, or of the great ocean, but the Phoenicians sail even to the 10 islands, somewhere in that ocean to the north, trading glass and pottery, their famous cedar trees, and the beautiful purple cloth they dye from murex shells. The 10 islands are England, and there is evidence that during Jesus's time that people traded in England. As a matter of fact, in England, they have artifacts that they think were from people coming in from the Bible stories to England. And we are talking about definitely Jesus' time, but this is talking about even earlier than Jesus' time, because this is a couple hundreds years BC. This is, I believe it's at Malachi, Old Testament Malachi times. So it is, 250 years before Jesus. Going on, I decided to go to Phoenicia. Phoenicia, like Greece, is a collection of city-states on a strip of land along the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. It's on the way to everything further east in Asia, Persia, Assyria, Arabia, even India. Phoenicia was under Persian rule at this time, and we Greeks were still at war with the Persians, but it wasn't an all-out everywhere war, so I felt I could travel there safely. Phoenicia is full of Greeks, and the people speak some mixture of Greek, which would make it easier for me. And here's a picture of a map which shows you where Phoenicia is here, and how it is on the way to everywhere, as he said. But the place that we're going to talk about next is Babylon, which is right here. Okay. So I made up my mind. I chose a trader I liked. We reached an agreement and I was off. Our ship sailed southeast, hugging the shore, past the great island of Cyprus, to land in the Phoenician colony of Muriandus in the Gulf of Issus. What I wanted first was to see Babylon, which was quite a way inland. On shore, a number of caravans were assembling, loading goods from Phoenicia and from all over the Mediterranean to take inland. The caravans would divide at the great Euphrates River, some going north, some south, some beyond into Asia. Wares were loaded onto mules and camels, and people were loaded onto horses for the slow, sandy, rocky trip about 100 miles across the Syrian desert. Horses are not my favorite mode of transportation. On some days, I walked. We traveled too slowly for me across Syria until we came to the Great River, where I looked for a boat to take me downriver to Babylon. I was amazed to see, and this is very interesting, leather cargo boats of many sizes, all round as platters, floating down the river with the current. They had come all the way from Armenia in the north with their wares. With 2 men steering, each boat carried goods and 1 or more donkeys to Babylon. I was told that when the cargo was sold, the boats were taken apart and the hides, that's the leather, loaded onto the donkeys for a long, long walk upstream, where they would rebuild for another trip downstream to the market. And they have a picture here. Round boats, while they're unusual to our eyes, are not that uncommon in the ancient world. They are called coracles in some parts of the world. And I'll show you some pictures of some coracles. And these are not necessarily made of leather. Some of them are made of bark. Some of them are made of wood, but they are round. Now over here on this corner here, this picture is what I wanted you to see. I saw a television show on it, and there are some who believe that Noah's Ark was on just a very large round boat. And here's a picture, and it was recreated in this television series that I saw. Now, whether or not it would be big enough to hold as many animals as Noah's Ark had, I don't know. But they were able to build it and it was seaworthy. Okay, and there's a picture here of that, of what they thought Noah's Ark might look like. Okay, moving on. I didn't travel in one of those boats. I found a good little wooden cargo ship for my trip down the Euphrates. It was about 600 miles to Babylon. For weeks, we sailed through great fields of grain on both sides of the river. I thought they must be the richest in the world, enough to supply the whole Persian Empire. There was sesame growing too, which the captain said produced all the oil used in the country. Now, most of us don't eat sesame oil, but we eat sesame seeds, especially on, buns and rolls. I did not see any fruit trees or vines, no olives, no figs, no grapes, but there were date palms, and everywhere, which provided not only food, wine, and honey, but also the fiber to make ropes and baskets. Since the climate is dry, The farmers constantly irrigate their fields with ingenious devices of rods and buckets. We sailed past irrigation dikes, past canals leading to other rivers. Finally, we reached the Royal Canal, which joins the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Boats sail easily through this canal from one great river to the other. And then we came to Babylon. It is surely the most enormous, most splendid city in the world. The city is a great square, almost 14 miles on each side, surrounded by first a deep moat full of water. Next, there is a wall, about 30 feet wide and about 120 feet high. There are houses on the wall and room for 4 horse chariots to drive abreast. In other words, not 4 chariots, but 4 horses pulling a chariot. I could not count the massive bronze gates in the wall. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture of Babylon. And flowing through the center of Babylon is the Euphrates River. But you can see how it is kind of squared off. I was told that about 100 years ago, the Persian king Cyrus laid siege to Babylon and finally took it over. I was told that owing to the vast size of the place, long after the outer portions of the town were taken, the inhabitants of the central parts, as the residents of Babylon declare, knew nothing about what had chanced, but as they were engaged in a festival, continued dancing and reveling until they heard the news of the capture. So it's so big that it was captured, and there were people partying, and they continued partying. About 5 years before, and here's a picture of it. And you can see back here are people fighting, but here people are dancing and waving palms. And about 50 years before Cyrus conquered the city, its king, Nebuchadnezzar, and that's a familiar name in the Bible, had captured Jerusalem and brought the Jews to Babylon. Cyrus freed them and sent them home. The Euphrates flows right through the city, and the river is lined with docks crowded with trading ships. The houses are 3 and 4 stories tall, and there is one tower that seems to scrape the sky. Does that sound familiar to you? A very tall tower that scrapes the sky? It is topped with glazed blue tiles, and people tell me it is the Tower of Babel. Beside it is the great temple to the Babylonian god Marduk. I heard that when Cyrus came to Babylon, there was a solid gold statue of Marduk in the temple, 15 feet high. Cyrus and later Darius respected the god and left it there, but Xerxes carried it away and melted it down. I was in Babylon about 30 years after Xerxes. I saw so many things with my own eyes and heard so many stories about past events that I stopped to write everything down. Although its more glorious days are past, Babylon is still grand and beautiful, a hum of trade and business, alive with artists, astronomers, scientists. Well, Babylon is not that grand right now. I looked it up, and here is a picture of Babylon today. And you can see it is just ruins. Babylon is in what today is called Iraq. And Saddam Hussein wanted to restore Babylon to its greatness, but he never was able to do that. But we do have some pictures of how beautiful Babylon was, based on descriptions of people like Herodotus and descriptions in the Bible. And that, what I just showed you is called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the ancient wonders of the world. And Babylon is still a UNESCO World Heritage Site, even though there's not much to see there. A lot of famous things happened there, one of which was the Hammurabi Code, which was the first laws that were put down in place and really the basis of many law codes today. Okay, and here we have a picture of, I think it's the Euphrates River. And you can see the temple to Marduk in the background. And there's an interesting architectural style there where it looks a little bit like a pyramid, but the sides are not flat. It's different levels, and each level is not as big as the one below it. It looks a little bit like a wedding cake that's been squared off. That's called a ziggurat. And finally, we come to Ishtar Gate. Ishtar Gate is in Berlin. It's in a museum called the Pergamon Museum. It has been beautifully restored, and it is magnificent. It happens to be something I have seen with my own eyes. When I was much younger, I went to Berlin, and one of the reasons I went to Berlin is I wanted to see some of the archaeological artifacts that were held in Berlin. Some were on the west side of Berlin, and went there first. I saw the bust of Nefertiti, the queen in Egypt, but most of them were on East Berlin. So I had to go through a special gate called, oh, I forgot what it was called. Oh, Charlie. It was Checkpoint Charlie. I had to go through there. I was questioned as to why I wanted to go into East Berlin, and I went in to see the Ishtar Gate. And they also have a large temple that has been reconstructed. The most wonderful archaeological reconstructions in the world are really in Berlin, because Germany had a very famous archaeologist, Heinrich Schliemann, in the 1800s, who basically stole this from the countries that they were from. But anyway, if you are interested in it, the Ishtar Gate, there's a YouTube that was very interesting, telling about Babylon and the gates. It's called Ishtar Gate and Processional Way, and it was produced by, I think, Smart History. It's a Khan, K-H-A-N, talk.
Objects they have is, well, it's not an object.
It's a gate for a city. There were 8 double gates that formed part of the walls around the ancient city of Babylon.
It's huge.
It doesn't just impress us, it impressed people when it was built. In fact, it was called one of the wonders of the world.
So Nebuchadnezzar, of biblical fame, ascended to the throne, and
if you're interested in it, it's not a very long video. It's only 6.5, well, maybe 7 minutes long, but it might be worth seeing if you're interested in Babylon. It's a very interesting time in history. So I'm going to stop now, and our next chapter will be called I Go to Egypt. Bye-bye.